Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Darnell Radford.
Today on the podcast, Artistic Director Seth Rozin and Co-Director J. Paul Nicholas stop by to talk about the Interact Theater American premiere of Moreno by Pravin Wilkins, on stage through November 24th. Here is my interview with Seth Rozin and J. Paul Nicholas for Moreno. And welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Darnell Radford, and today I'm in the virtual studio to talk about Interact Theater Company's production of Moreno by Pravin Wilkins. And so I'm here with the directors, so I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves. We'll start with Seth.
Hi, thanks for having me, Darnell. Seth Rozin, producing artistic director at Interact, and also one of the co-directors here of Moreno.
And I am the other half of the co-director team, J. Paul Nicholas, local Philly actor, director, fight choreographer, teacher, blah, blah, blah.
Cool. Thank you for joining us today. So I saw Moreno opening night, and I could tell by the pre-show music that we were in for it. I feel like it really set us up for what we were about to experience. And then the piece itself, the whole time I was just in my head saying, like, I can't believe how timely this is. And I just thought in my head, like, you know, had the outcome of the election been different, this still would have been a very relevant, timely piece. And I always find that to be very interesting because the conversations that you'll have with the audience when you unpack this and discussions would have slightly changed were that outcome different, but it still allowed for a very fruitful, meaningful, and, you know, pointed conversations to go on. So tell us a bit about Moreno.
Well, I'll just start by saying that when I first read the play about a year and a half ago, my first reaction was I was very drawn into play that in the world of football, a locker room. I was excited by that. I was excited by the idea that it was not a typical sports play, and that we don't have the coach comes in with the whistle and the authority figure. We're really seeing the players be the players, and the world that they have separate from the other authority figures around them. And I was really interested in how they are responding as very, very different people and players to the events around them, and become in conflict around those responses, so that we're seeing not one particular point of view, but we're seeing 4 points of view in conflict, which is always exciting to me. It's one of the things that Interact likes to do a lot. And then the second thought I had as I was reading through it was, is this dated? Is this going to feel dated to an audience? It's set in 2016 with events that we remember pretty clearly, particularly around Kaepernick's protest. And I wasn't sure, and I felt like it was still very current, but I wasn't sure how others would feel. And we did a reading of it with 3 of the 4 actors that are in the production in December of 23. And the response was really strong, very positive, and very, people felt it was extremely relevant. What we didn't know then was that it was going to be the opposite of dated. It was going to be almost too piercingly relevant and current because of the way things did unfold with this election. So I'll leave it at that, but it's rewarding in some ways and also difficult in others.
Yeah. And Paul, what were your first impressions of the piece?
I came to the process a little bit late. The piece and the cast, everything was already in place. So, you know, I was nervous when Seth and I talked about me coming in to help him direct it, I was nervous that it wouldn't be of what my role would be because it had already been chosen. But as soon as I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how exciting this is going to be. I immediately thought the same things that Seth just said, that this was going to be timely and poignant, no matter which way the election went. For those who are listening, I don't know if we're going to get into it later, but for those who are listening, what we're talking about is the play is set in the locker room and also on the field, but it's set around a fictional NFL team going through the 2016 to 2017 season. That was the season in which Colin Kaepernick was doing his protest by kneeling during the national anthem. And that was also when Donald Trump was running for office the first time. So there are a lot of references to that and a lot of discussion around that, as Seth said, from the 4 different points of view, which is very exciting. Not only is this what Interact is good at doing, but this is what theater should be. Theater should give you an opportunity to look at life through the point of view of other people and to see other points of view. So you don't have to be in the argument yourself. You can watch the argument take place and question your own point of view. You may always come back to your own point of view, but it is good to be exposed to other points of view. So that's one of the reasons I really loved it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that during the taking the knee and Colin Kaepernick, there was a whole thing about there was a whole conversation about celebrities and how they have everyone's attention. And so when they have that attention, they should do something meaningful with it. But then when Colin took a knee and made very clear statements about why he was taking a knee, he was then criticized for the exact same thing we ask people who have influence to do. And it was just, and it just kind of consumed everyone because it became a conversation about patriotism when it was really about injustice.
Yeah, and I think that's something that the play gets at, and some of the music references get at, and certainly what the character of Zeke says explicitly in the play is that social change happens sometimes because people with that kind of influence lend their voice to a cause, and even more so, Paul and I are both big-time sports fans. That's one of the reasons that we both like to play, and that why I reached out to Paul in the first place. But we both know that sports is sometimes the arena in which something in the larger world takes hold politically and moves the needle. Jackie Robinson did as much for civil rights as many of the people that are given more political credit, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and so forth. Muhammad Ali had tremendous influence on social change because of his celebrity as a boxer and his willingness to get into that arena. So these are the play is getting at that and ask the question, not only what would you do if you were in that position of influence and power, but also what would you do if you were one of the people who had the opportunity to follow or not one of those folks. One of the I think strongest moments for me in the play is when Ezekiel Williams, who's a veteran linebacker, he's kind of the Malcolm Jenkins, if you want a local reference, from the Eagles, a player who came out and spoke out after Kaepernick started his protest. Zeke Williams is like that. And he says to Luis Moreno, the hotshot superstar running back, I don't have your power. You have influence that I just will never have because I don't have the world following my literal every move. So what are you going to do with that power? And I think that question is one that I hope will resonate for lots of people, not only if you had that power, but if you were in that locker room or on that team, would you follow their protest or not and take the risk of losing your career, losing a lot of money to stand up for something that mattered to you a lot?
Yeah. I also think it's interesting that when you get to that level of sports, it's so life-changing to get that contract that it's more than just playing the game. You're actually thinking about how you can help your family get out of the situation they may currently be in, or you're just thinking about how you can help, period. And then you think about where you came from, because there's always this conversation about like never forgetting where you came from. And so you have all this pressure, and your contract, the ink's not even dry on your contract yet. And then political issues happen, social issues come up, and now you're being positioned to say something when you already have kind of an agenda that is beyond you, in a sense, because you're thinking about family and community already. And you're right. That conversation that if I speak out too much, all of that is going to be jeopardized, compromised. And I think it was interesting that Moreno has a similar struggle, where he walked in with a purpose of his own agenda, even though he kind of carries off with this bravado. But we do find out later that it's more to all of these characters than just the surface that they're giving.
From a theatrical standpoint, from a standpoint of a fan of theater or of storytelling, that was another thing that is really attractive about the script, is that the characters are so complex. Mm-hmm. They seem on the surface to be two-dimensional, and we just keep learning more and more and more about them. And as they unfold themselves, they just become more easy to identify with and easy to root for, I guess. I guess at some point in the play, you end up rooting for all of them. Yeah.
So let's unpack,
and rooting against all of them at some point.
Yes. Let's dive a little bit more into all of the characters. We've talked about Moreno and EZEKIEL, but let's talk more about the characters and where they are as we sort of enter into the piece.
Yeah, so there's 4 characters, and Moreno, the title character, is a Mexican-American running back. There are very few Latin players in the league, so that already makes him unique. He's clearly gifted, and he's definitely a hot shot who makes no bones about the fact that he's in it to make a lot of dough, because making a lot of money allows him to do everything else that he wants in life, including take care of his family. And he doesn't pretend to be otherwise. He's very upfront about that, but doesn't seem to have any sense at the beginning of the play of responsibility towards his community or towards any larger cause in the world. And the central conflict, in essence, is with him and Zeke Williams, the veteran linebacker who grew up in a family that with parents who were Black Panthers. And so he had a sort of political dimension from his upbringing, and was actually is living to somehow fulfill his parents' dreams, but not because of playing football. In fact, his mother explicitly didn't like the fact that he wanted to play football, and felt that he was being bought away by the man in doing so. And just recently died before the play begins. So Zeke is actually channeling some of his own conflict in the course of the play, with his living up to his parents' expectations, and the Kaepernick protest gives him a chance to fulfill that in a way that he never anticipated he might. And so he and Moreno are at the center of the conflict of, is your life going to be, are you going to stand for something and be about something, or are you not? And then surrounding those two guys are Danny Lombardo, who's kind of a Tom Brady-esque white quarterback, who's his integrity is in that he's all about winning no matter what. He puts money aside and puts other life achievements aside so that he can be the absolute best at what he wants to achieve, and that has a certain integrity to it, even if it's with blinders on with regard to other things. And then we've got CRE'VON Garcon, who's a Black Haitian Creole cornerback who, in many ways, is the human glue in the play. He's very attentive to individual people's stuff and wants to help them all process their stuff, and doesn't have a very strong political sense, but he believes in supporting his fellow teammates and so forth. So he gets caught up in both wanting to help his teammates work through their conflicts, both with each other and individually, while supporting the protest as an outsider. And we see all these four wrestle. There's really scenes with all of them together and scenes with individual groups of two in which they wrestle with both the personal and the political throughout the play.
Yeah. I was saying how CRE'VON also acts like the relief, but is sort of the voice of reason in his own way too. And he carries the stereotype of the bravado of young players who've just joined. They've got all this energy. Like, I've been picked for a reason. And he sort of has similar energy with Moreno, which I guess is why they kind of bond so easily. But played by Abdul, Sesay, it's just a joy to to watch on stage.
It was fun to work with him, and find that character, because it's not easy to play something that it's not that it's broad, but he's a real character. Mm-hmm. You know, he has such a particular take on everything, and he has got some of the funniest lines in the play by far. And
he's not, CRE'VON, the character, is not trying to be funny.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's just being himself.
Yeah.
He just doesn't take him too seriously. He doesn't take anything too seriously until he does. Mm-hmm. And those moments are lovely. And Abdul plays him perfectly, because he's just being himself. He's not trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Which turns out to be even funnier.
And I like how the script doesn't shy away from the sort of locker room dialogue, because we know that past news in the past has sort of brought that locker room talk to a negative space, but it's just like it's just human communication. Like, and they have a shorthand with each other, so they're not looking at all the buttons that are politically pushed. As soon as we hear those things. And so I think it's always a value to kind of go into those rooms and see how every character is kind of adjusting to that space, and they don't walk out of there with like some crazy mindset, which is often what is portrayed in the community space when things like that happen.
And
go ahead, Paul.
Speaking of that, Darnell, the play. Listen, it's a play. Mm-hmm. It takes liberties, and football fans will watch and go, wait a minute, that's not exactly how that would go. And of course not. We have a little tiny stage and we're trying to pull off a play. But Ray Didinger, the Hall of Fame broadcaster, a local Philly guy, saw a read through, saw a rehearsal, I think has seen the full production, right, Seth? Or he has not seen it. I think this weekend he's going to see it. But from what he saw, he said, liberties notwithstanding, the dialogue is pretty accurate about how these players would behave, of how professional football players would behave and would talk to each other. It's pretty darn accurate. And we really applaud Pravin for honoring that and yet making it so theatrically interesting.
Yeah.
And it helped to have a great cast. We have 4 perfect actors for this, 4 perfect Philly actors, and could not imagine anyone else doing these roles. So we feel very fortunate. When each of them, Charvez, Grant, who plays Zeke Williams, when he walked into the audition, it was like, he is this guy. And, you need to be physically imposing and have the brain to believe that he's got all this stuff roiling in him, politically and otherwise. And the heart.
And the heart.
Yes, a deep heart. And Gabriel Elmore as Danny is perfectly suited to the hyper-focused, blinders on Tom Brady-esque quarterback. And then Frank Jimenez, who when I read the play, I immediately thought Frank's got to play this role. And he's so unlike the role in real life, but he's completely willing to go wherever it takes him, and this role really asked him to be incredibly brash and unlikable in so many ways, but he has an incredible journey from that to becoming someone who's putting his making tremendous sacrifice for a larger cause that you could never imagine him making at the beginning of the play.
Yeah, I was thinking about I was thinking about the elements as their season progresses, and I actually do love sports plays because you can't actually play a full game on stage. You know, it kind of reminds me of your production of The Great Leap, where all the elements were there, but we didn't actually see a game. You know,
Right.
We also found out it's not that easy to run practice drills on stage.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that while Paul and I are both big sports fans and football aficionados from afar, as is our choreographer, Ontaria Kim Wilson, the 4 actors had very little knowledge about football and in general sports. And so there was a lot of education going on, but they were so warm to it and so hungry to eat it up and had the minds and bodies to do it right.
I actually love when there's a chat, when there's an interview with actors and they say like, you must be a diehard fan that you played this character so well. And it's like, if you're sitting with theater people, you're just like, no, it's training. Okay. They're professionals.
Yeah.
More than one person has asked if Charvez was a real linebacker. He really did play football.
Yeah. Oh, he did.
No, he didn't.
No.
But people asked.
Yeah, it just plays out right. So I guess we're kind of in the middle of it. It's fine. So there's a moment in the play where an F word is mentioned, and I looked at that as the proverbial gun in the play. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Where when it's presented, it has to return in some way. And when it did, that was a rewarding payoff. It was like, oh, I see. Okay. What was the point of bringing that up if we're not going to, return to it? I'm sorry to be so cryptic, audience. You'll know when you get there, but it stood out for me. And I was like, hey, that right there is an interesting.
There's a lot of good playwriting in that way, that things that are set up character-wise or story-wise early that you don't necessarily know what it's leading to, but the threads get tied together in ways that really add up to something dynamic. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Pravin does a good job of that, of weaving those things throughout the play so that you feel like it's pretty well made and pretty fully felt that everything mattered. There were no loose ends or extraneous threads. It's very tight and adds up to something pretty substantive.
Yeah. So when did you decide to add this production to the season? Like, what was the time frame?
We were pretty sure we were going to do it by February of this year, I should say. And so we were excited about doing a play about the 2016 football season and election season during the 2024 football season and election season. And we knew by that point that it was going to be Trump again. So we did think that there was going to be some synergy around that. What we didn't know is how closely it would hew what happened this year would hew to what happened then. And also,
when you say you knew it would be Trump again, you mean we knew that he would be running again?
Yes.
He would be the candidate. Right.
Correct. And we also knew that opening night was going to be 2 nights after Election Day.
Yeah.
And so what we kept saying to ourselves is, well, our audience is going to be despondent or elated one way or the other. And that will have an effect on the play's reception. What's been interesting is that while I think our audience overall is kind of despondent over the election, they've come to the play with a different kind of attitude, which is, I need to get out. I need to see a piece of theater. I want something that has meaning and that reminds me of why I should care. And this play has done that for people. So it's a little bit different than I was worried that it was either going to be despondent to the point of people not wanting to go out, or elated to the point where people were going to think it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That the play didn't matter. And it's neither of those things. It's clearly hitting people in a good place. It's entertaining them. It has meaning. It's about the ongoing struggle of social change, and reminds us that elections come and go.
Yeah.
And we have opportunity to make changes with those, but we'll have more opportunities in the future. I think that's an aloe right now.
Yeah. I sometimes feel like we should be promoting theater as like, if there's a banner, it says live theater, we make it make sense. Because we
make life make sense.
Yeah.
Because we're often saying like, I don't understand this. And a, fully fleshed out story by playwright with multiple characters and who are approaching this from different angles does make it more palatable for us to understand, because ultimately you're just carrying your own emotions, and without like seeing some interpretation of it, you often just keep your own viewpoint intact.
Yeah, I was thinking, and I think I said this on opening night at our reception. You guys were both there, so I remember this, but I hadn't said it quite like this before, but I really feel that one of the things that makes a society humane is theater, because theater invites us to witness the lives of others, and as Paul said earlier, consider other points of view and empathize with people who are going through something that we might not be able to imagine otherwise if we tried to just in our heads. It allows us to process those considerations that other characters go through, and that makes us more critical thinking, and it makes us more humane, and we need that more than ever in society right now.
The other thing that Seth said on opening night is that theater is about building community and bringing people together. And we really need that in the American society today. It's so divided.
Yeah.
And everything that we do is about which side you're on. And we run everything through this filter of, which team do you support? And we just need to stop all that. And so yeah, theater is one of the ways to just get over that, to have an opportunity to understand each other better.
Yeah, it's
Even if we don't agree. Even if we don't agree, it's okay.
Yeah, it's hard to like when your person doesn't win, we're still all in the same country, and we need to champion what the country is trying to do and how it presents itself no matter what. It's always like a stressful thing when you feel like the people who speak on your behalf, or, in terms of like the country, just don't carry the way you expect them to carry. And so you try to give the benefit of the doubt, but there's too many examples that are like, fool me once, I feel like the country is on like, fool me 40 times, and it's also interesting how as nonprofit organizations, we're really supposed to, like, I don't know, be neutral or something, but we always choose shows that basically speak to what we're thinking about and how we, the conversation we're trying to have. And it always makes me wonder how, the athletes in the NFL, for example, like they are kind of their own kind of people. They can sort of stand out and say something, but it also comes in conflict with the fact that they sort of work for a nonprofit, or they're just
technically, but not really.
They're just all represented by a nonprofit. It's kind of like if we were for-profit theaters, and then the Alliance is the nonprofit that sort of supports us.
Well, and that's another reason why I'm excited by this play, and a lot of the things that we try to do at Interact are to introduce people to worlds of people that we wouldn't necessarily see on stage that often or in any other context. I feel like, there's gazillions of plays about families, and there's a reason for that. Everyone comes from a family and has issues with their families and strong feelings about their families and so forth. But we like to do plays that are about worlds and people and characters that are not always so familiar to us. And I think that this play does a great job of introducing 4 characters that none of whom probably represent almost anyone in our audience in terms of their background or their mindset, but they all have something to believe in, as Paul said, and something to also to perhaps feel strongly against. But watching them grapple in the same world that we're in allows us to understand how other people, understand the lives of others. How would other people deal with this? How does that make me think about the same issue? Just seeing ourselves on stage is not terribly interesting to me, which is why we don't do those plays. I understand why those plays sell better. Plays that tell you, look, come see yourself on stage. Come see a play about a family just like yours. I get why that's attractive. We're trying to say, come see a play about a bunch of people you never would have thought would have this meaningful response to the world, the same world that we're responding to.
Yeah, and there's also so much variety. Our theater community is so vibrant, and I do love that about Interact. I feel like your mission is so well defined that if you just hear the explanation of like, have you heard about this play? And they give you a description of the play, it's like, that sounds like Interact. Sounds like Interact does that. I have said that many times over the years. That sounds like an Interact play.
I hope that's a good thing. We sometimes feel that people think of us as, a left-wing theater with an agenda, and our only agenda is to get people to talk and think and engage in a conversation about something, not to tell anyone how to think. And I think Pravin does such a terrific job in this play of not preaching. He has individual characters might preach, but they are butt up against other points of view that question the things that are being preached. So it forces all the characters to grapple with their own thoughts, which is the same thing that we want to do.
Let's talk about the talkback discussions. I know there's sort of like this, I don't know, maybe it's because of the pandemic, like it seemed like whenever there was a talkback, people were more likely to leave instead of giving the actors time to transition and come out and engage with them. But I also feel like this piece is like, if there's a talkback that night, I'm going to sit because I already feel like I'm in my feelings and I'm still sort of processing as the show ends. So what have the talkback discussions, how have they been received?
Well, first of all, Interact, we've been doing talkbacks after a majority of our performances for going way, way back. And we do different kinds of talkbacks. We have some with company artists. Paul and Charvez were participated in one on Saturday. So they were giving the insider sort of point of view. We also bring in speakers and community leaders and scholars. So we're trying to broaden the context for folks. And our audiences, our subscribers in particular, come to our talkback days because of the talkback days, and they want to stay. And we usually have pretty big audiences for those. And they don't ask actors how they memorized their lines or how they got into acting. They ask about the play. What was it like to play a character who believed something you didn't believe? How did, they would voice their own, audience members voice their own opinions about the issues in the play. And then we have real conversation, and it involves everyone. And that's, to me, the highlight of what we do at Interact. It's what we aim for, is to create discussion, to spark dialogue among people who might think differently, and to learn not only from the play we just saw, but to learn from the people who saw it with you.
Yeah. I feel like when someone says, how did you remember all those lines? The response should be, which ones specifically?
I always think that it's like, you could ask that at every single play. And the answer is, it's very simple, which is, they're professionals. That's what they do.
Yeah.
It's one of the tools of the trade. It's not the most interesting tool, but it is a necessary tool.
Yeah.
The much more interesting thing is, how did you find a way to relate to and play with full sincerity a character who's completely not like you at all, and say lines or have beliefs that you had trouble getting behind? That's way more interesting to me than how you do memorize your lines.
Yeah. I also like, when it's asked, like, are there elements of this character that resonate with you more? And like, because I guess those questions come because they don't get to see the rehearsal process. They're only seeing the fine, polished presentation, which I think is why theater people are very forgiving of something that may go wrong in the production, because we realize that it is live and anything can and will happen. But what is more important is how everyone carries, when it happens. And sometimes you're just sort of like, if you're in a comedy where the laughter, causes a character to break, and then the audience loves that. And they're supportive of the character getting back on track too, and then by the end, they're sort of like, yes, even in that moment, which we saw in real time, they still told this whole story. And by the end, it was a wonderful collection altogether. I think people are just happy to see that from start to finish, this completed, and they took something from it. Anything.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, just in your own opinion, how can theater focus this conversation to raise awareness of the country's direction?
What a great question.
What I would say is, at the end of this play, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but at the end of this play, which is about, two players trying to take Colin Kaepernick's protest to the next level to try to make it have more impact than it ultimately did, and discover the challenges of social change when you are intending to try to move the needle. What I would say is that what we can do in theater is try to move the needle a tiny tick at a time. I've always believed that the best that we can hope for as theater makers when we're trying to do work that addresses societal issues is to create a more critical thinking citizenry, so that when they go out there and they watch the news, they think about it a little bit more than they did the night before after seeing this play. When they walk down the street and see something that is relevant to the script, they might think about it differently than they did the night before, and so forth. And over time, the ripple effect of that has real value, but you're not going to change things overnight. One of the things the characters in the play learn is that social change doesn't happen just because you decide to do something radical.
Yeah.
In fact, most of the biggest social change moments in history don't happen because of an intended event. They happen because of unintended consequences of things. The best example I can think of is George Floyd. Yeah. George Floyd's death, George Floyd's murder, was not intended by anyone as a social justice event. Mm-hmm. It happened, and because it was captured on video, because we were all sitting at home with nothing to do because of COVID and watching the television a lot, it took hold in a way that it wouldn't have might not have at least in other times. And that moved the needle a lot more than all the protests that came before, in the 10 years before and the 10 years since. That moment happened accidentally. And sometimes, I would say more often than not, in social change, it's because of something we don't plan. So what we can plan is just move the needle a tiny bit with a few people at a time. Mm-hmm. And that's what we can hope for.
And I would say yes to all of that. And I would add something a little bit more specific, a little bit more narrow for each person that I would love for them to take away from this performance. The next time you hear someone protesting or just railing or complaining about something that sounds to you like it has nothing to do with you, just take a few minutes and listen to what they have to say. And don't judge them because of what team they're on or what color they're wearing or anything like that. Just listen to what they have to say. Mm-hmm. Not saying you need to agree with them, but just listen.
I would
and don't listen to all the commentators around them telling you what they're about.
Yeah.
Actually go to that person and listen to them and listen to what they have to say. You know what I did today? You can cut this out of the podcast if you want. You know what I did today while I was doing stuff around the house and doing other things?
Yeah.
I listened to almost half, so over an hour of the Joe Rogan interview with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Listen to the whole thing. Instead of listening to the news outlets that I listened to tell me what it was about, I actually listened to it. And I think it's important for all of us to do that. You don't have to spend an hour and a half doing that, but you know, just check out the truth and stop listening to what other people are telling you is the truth.
Yeah. I think it's also important to realize the bubble that you are in. You know, we are.
Yeah. So see, you don't see that you're in a bubble.
We're in the northeast of the country. It's very liberal here, even though we are in it. I mean, there's only two parts of this state that are liberal, but we're surrounded by all of this too. And the fact that Pennsylvania, the makeup of Pennsylvania, is what it is, and that we are still so consumed by the general conversation that we're having here in Philadelphia. It says a lot. Like, you know, as those results were coming in, I kept saying, like, they say this all the time. Like, we find a candidate that's on the coast, and the mindsets of the coast, east and west, are different than the center of the country. And so they try to line it up by getting like a running mate that's from the Midwest usually. And they made a joke about how the Harris-Walz campaign, you know, in terms of the vice president, looked very similar to the Clinton-Kaine campaign. You know, in terms of like the attempt that they were trying to make. And yeah, it's crazy when you don't think that, you know, we kind of feel the same way in theater. Like, theater, this is the biggest thing. This is the only thing that matters to many of us. But there's so much more out there. I was making the point that there are a lot of sports fans who are not theater fans, but there are a lot of theater artists who are sports fans. And which is a unique thing in Philadelphia. Having worked in cities over the country, I can tell you that is unique. Mm-hmm. That's a Philadelphia thing. Yeah, because I do feel like the mindset of artists is to try to open up and explore things that are outside of your general wheelhouse. And I also, you're right, it is the makeup of Philly, because I can point, almost everyone has been to a Phillies game or a Flyers game or a Eagles game or Union. You know, like, all of our teams have been embraced by the entire city in some way because of how arts and culture is the makeup of who we are as a city. So I think, but it does make sense for us to think, like, you know, there was a whole section in South Philly that thought differently than we do. And we need to be aware of that. We need to try to understand why they feel the way they do, instead of saying, like, oh no, they were wrong, or they ruined it for us, or whatever comments you want to make. I think everything that happened is eye-opening for all of us. And I hope that we have more, that we don't shy away from conversations in the future as we go. Because I am a fan of talkbacks. I think we should have them. I just want people to change their mindset about them. It's part of the show to unpack the show, you know?
Yeah. I would say for us, our audiences that come to talkbacks almost always say that staying for the talkback, occasionally it's that it helped explain something they didn't understand, but mostly what they say is it broadened their appreciation. Mm-hmm. They liked the show, and they liked it more because of the conversation had afterwards. Yeah. And, you know, if a couple comes to a show and leaves before the talkback, but they're arguing on the way home about the play, that's a big win for us. We still think that's great. Or if, as I said, if they turn on the news that night and they just think differently, that's a big win. But we don't necessarily see those things. But when we're having the actual talkbacks, we are witnessing, we see the light bulbs going off. We see the challenges people are facing by hearing different points of view right in front of us. And it's very exciting, and it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
We have 2 more weeks of the show, starting tonight through the 24th of November. And we have some great special guests, including Ray Didinger, who's coming on Sunday for a talkback. And next Thursday night, Glenn Macno, who's a WIP sports talk radio veteran, coming in. And I think the one thing we didn't say much about is that the play is also very entertaining. And
Yes.
I can't always say that about every single Interact play, but this one play has a lot of entertainment value. It's funny. It's got some high theatricality. It's got a lot of movement in it. It's just a fun show in addition to having a lot of substance. So we hope people will come out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So listeners, you still have time to be part of this conversation. You can visit Interact Theater, and that's theater with RE.org, and get tickets to Moreno now through the 24th of November. Buy more than one, because theater is more fun with the +1, as we always say. And so Seth, Rozin, Jay, Paul, Nicholas, thank you so much for taking the time to unpack Moreno with me. And this piece could not be more timely right now. I feel like it's such a broken statement to keep saying all the time, but it made so much sense right now to just kind of process everything and say, like, looking, as I said to Seth at opening night, I said it's a look back at the present, and it truly is. So thank you for talking about this piece, and everybody be a part of this conversation now through November 24th. Thank you so much for chatting with me. It was truly a pleasure.
Thank you, Darnell. This was great. And for those of you who are listening who think, oh, well, theater always extends, we are not extending. The 24th will be the final show. So
Yeah.
So don't think you're being strategic by waiting.
Yeah. Don't miss out. Join in. Okay.